Here's a question for you. Is DuckTales or Chip and Dale the peak of Capcom's Disney games? Two excellent 8-bit games, the only ones that Capcom gave sequels, and they are very different games. To the uncritical eye, they're both just platformers based on cartoons, but they are dramatically different from each other. Chip to Dale no Daisakusen is based on a popular Disney weekday afternoon cartoon. It turned the two chipmunks from old Disney cartoons into investigators in a very 1980s television show mold. You could say that the show was a cult hit. At the outset of the game, it lets you choose whether you want to be Chip or Dale. Of course, that's only if you're playing by yourself. If you're playing two players, then each player gets one, and they play the game simultaneously. The story of the game is that Gadget, the mouse engineer who assists Chip and Dale, has been kidnapped. On their quest to rescue her, they'll have to progress through 12 extremely long stages. The A button jumps, while the B button will pick up an object that you're standing next to. Usually this will be something like a box or apples, but in two-player mode it can be the other player. Hitting the B button again throws what you're holding on to. If you hit an enemy with it, you'll take them out, usually. You aren't limited to throwing objects horizontally either. You can toss them straight up. There's a really huge variety of enemies in this game, and they tend to have fairly distinctive behaviors. These tough mice will knock boxes out of the way, and they take 2 hits to defeat. These aliens will turn into a copy of Chip or Dale to confuse you, and these pelicans will spit any box that you throw right back at you. And these toys will bob back and forth, dipping down to hit you, unless you strike them first, in which case they spin in place. Scattered throughout the levels are a lot of pickups. They can be found out in the open, behind boxes, in crates that you just bump into, and occasionally they're even invisible. Collecting 100 of the flowers will make a star float onto the screen, and getting that star grants you an extra life. For the stars that you find lying around on stages, collecting 20 of those grants an instant extra life. Acorns restore your health up to a maximum of 3, and you could find Zipper the Fly in a crate, and he'll knock out enemies as you run along. It's not really invincibility, you can still get hurt, but it's something close to that. Not all of the items that you pick up and throw are created equally. The little boxes will travel in a straight line until they hit an enemy, but the big apple will just keep on going. Bombs will explode eventually, so they can't be carried forever, and the metal cubes can't be thrown very far, but they stick around and can be stacked up, so you can use them as steps to reach higher places. When you start the game, you're thrown into a level immediately, but once you complete it, you're taken to a map of stages where you can choose a path to take through the game. Not all stages are created equal, though. Some of the levels are very long, multi-segmented affairs. Basically, entire worlds in other games. And not every stage has a boss. The bosses in this game aren't too difficult. The patterns tend to be very simple, and they give you a ball that bounces once and then never goes away. Because it bounces, you can often hit the boss multiple times. After you clear a stage, you'll go to a bonus area where you can get items hidden behind crates. You only have about 10 seconds to collect things, and if you get your 100th flower while you're here, and you won't be able to collect it. I have one major problem with this game, and that's how poorly the enemy hitboxes work. They're much bigger than their sprite, and that makes jumping over a lot of enemies much more difficult than it should be. Also, there's a bit of a difficulty balance issue here. About 75% of the game is trivially easy, and the remaining 25% is absurdly difficult. Like this shaft with some very poorly moving platforms that you have to jump between, and they require some pixel-perfect jumping. In general, the game isn't difficult, it's just that there's a few places with an extreme difficulty spike. But those complaints are pretty minor in the scope of the entire package. This is one of the better put-together platformers on the Famicom. A sequel was released in the very final days of the Famicom's life. In fact, it's Capcom's last game on the system. To return to my initial question, though, of whether Chip and Dale or DuckTales is better, I think I come down on DuckTales. I just have more fun with the movement of the pogo mechanics. But if someone were to tell me that this was their favorite Capcom Disney game, I couldn't really argue against that. This is one of the high points of 8-bit video games. They might let you skip levels, but you're going to want to play them all because they're just that well designed. And the 2-player mode adds a lot to the game, or at least adds a lot of fights.